I'm going to give you a little bit of a presentation about my influences. I think it's always really helpful when you have an idea of the people that you are thinking about and have been looking at over time. And I wanted to share this with you. I think it's really very helpful for other artists to see, yeah, I've looked at that too. Either it inspired me or didn't. But maybe I'll go back after I've heard somebody talk about what really affected them when they were looking at it. And so I wanted to share this with you this morning. So, let's see. This is both of those pieces that you just saw. This is Maxwell Parrish. And I've been looking at his work for a number of years. I still go back to him. I'm not saying that he's the utmost favorite, but he's always a favorite of mine because of mood. He creates such a feeling for me, because I am from the Northeast, of the fall, of the seasons. And obviously it's not only his color, which is very dynamic, but it's also the use of light and the color of the light. So you really do have that butter hour, as they call for camera photographers, captured his work. I hope most of you know a little bit about his history, but he was an illustrator mostly for a lot of the major magazines prior to and the turn of the century. So a lot of people actually collected his work. Here's another one of his pieces, again, creating the mood, a story. And you see, as you look at the works I'm showing you and also my own work, how important a story is to the work. And I imagine if I saw yours, it will come through. You cannot hide it. Even when you're doing a very simple still life, even what I'll be doing for you today. Who you are and how you think about what you're looking at always comes through what you're drawing, what you are seeing. So, another artist that I've also been influenced by is Millet. He's a wonderful intaglio artist of the, again, around the same period of Van Gogh, a post-expressionist. And in fact, Van Gogh really admired his work and often would reproduce some of the same scenes in color with his paints, oil paints. But Millet also is very attractive to me because he, as a printmaker, I have a master's in printmaking. I've also appreciated the drawing that he accomplished in a lot of his work. And so his foundation would often be Conti, a black Conti, and then he would add small nuances of color, just ever so subtly on top of that, which enhanced the contrast, but also gave it another type of body to just a black and white. And again, do study him because he used color pastel in such a delicate way. It was surprising when I discovered him. He's best known probably as you probably think of as an oil painter of the Gleaners. That's one of his famous paintings, okay? But another thing I like about Millet is his understanding of the relationship of man to the earth and how much, not only hard work it was, but also that there was an affinity within that work of the attachment to something that we were made out of, the stuff of the earth. And it's just so beautiful to see how he really communicates that. And also a lot of his imagery have to do with sheep and shepherds. And he really had a strong religious foundation. So the sheep was very important in terms of we being like sheep. And so he often brings that across in a lot of his work. So do take time, if you haven't heard of him, to study him. Another artist that I really have always admired is Bruegel and Bosch. This is a piece by Bosch, and you'll see the next piece will be by Bruegel. Bosch also, as you probably think of more of his scary, apocalyptic kinds of images, or the Garden of Delight, really when you really look at some of the other images, you begin to see the story is not only just scary, but it's real in the sense that culturally he was speaking about the misinformation at that time when the church was just getting really off of its rockets before Martin Luther appeared on the scene in the Reformation. You're going to get a lot of history from this morning, so I hope you enjoy it. But here you have a man who really understood the chaos of the time, not unlike what we're really experiencing now to a certain degree. And so his stories, his paintings tell a lot about imagery, ideas, and the story of the times in which he's painting. You'll see that there's small little things happening in the house. There's sort of like a little tete-a-tete going on with a couple in the doorway. There's another man relieving himself. There's pants over the window. There is sort of decay going on, you know. And this is called the hayway or the wanderer. He is moving on And his travels are difficult, as you can see from either the bandage on his leg, probably got bit by a dog, or the tatteredness of some of his coat and his belongings. But he's like Christian in the Pilgrim's Progress. He wants to get away from this kind of chaos. He's on his way from another road, another pathway. And you'll see a lot of this in Bosch's work. So again, if you haven't really studied some of his work, the symbolism is fabulous. And it really can give you another view of not only color, but story, as they say. So, creaky board. Okay. This one is by Bruegel. I discovered him fairly early on in my pastel career. I switched from printmaking because of my degree. It was difficult for me to rent printing space and a press at the time. So I remembered that my mother had a box of pastels that she had given me a long time ago. And I said, okay, let's try this, you know. And I really, really enjoyed doing it. So with that discovery of pastels, I also began to discover a lot of other artists. And even though Bruegel is not a pastel artist, he does use oils, he is a storyteller again. And this is one called Icarus, The Fall of Icarus. And if you know the story of Icarus, he and his father worked on making wings of wax. And but the warning was don't fly too close to the sun or they'll melt. And here you have the adult in the sky looking down, and if you can't see it, this is where Icarus is fallen right here. When you first see Bruegel's work, you can get a sense of a story, but he's like a real old-fashioned Where's Waldo. Because if you start to zero in on his paintings, you begin to see, that's what he's talking about. And that is the kind of surprise that I pray that my work continues to be and hopefully eventually becomes more of. Did you see something a little bit more? And I want that kind of element of, there's another story here, another level, another place. Another artist that has influenced me, also because my husband was a fabulous designer and also worked in stained glass, is that John Lafarge. Now this is just one of his windows. He's contemporary with Charles Tiffany. So if you haven't heard of him, again, I encourage you to look him up. He's also beautiful in his watercolors. I'll show you also that in a minute, and oils. He's done wonderful, wonderful windows all over the Northeast, and I'm not sure you have them down here, but I do know that if you have time to study, the design work is, he's a part of that Beaux-Arts period where you have all the floral influences and natural influences coming about. And so peacocks sometimes come into his windows, and this is full of the floral nuances. The framing technique is exquisite because he really lets the frame glow along with the glass and the glow that's coming from the glass form. So here is now one of his paintings. And those of you who love to do flowers, again, looking at some of his flowers and just the concept of not only value, but color. He just knows how to bring the blues, the reds, and the greens together, create all the grays that you see in the values and the shadows of each of the petals of the rose that you're seeing there. And I talked a lot about that unity yesterday in the workshop, of not just picking a color and using it only in one area, but think about how you can employ it. And you'll see that in the demonstration throughout the piece that brings a beautiful unity to everything you're looking at. Another floral artist towards the end of his life is Manet. Beautiful little book called The Flowers of Manet, or Last Flowers of Manet. And again, just the exquisite economy of touch and line and form that you see in his work. And unity by taking the same colors that he's working with, the flowers, the green, the pinks, the violets, blending them together to get that gradation of gray to violet in the background. That's what sets it off as well. The negative space, you cannot live without it if you're painting. And the positive, the unity between the two is essential from the get-go, drawing from the beginning. So again, I'll demonstrate that more. But these are things that I love to look at and keep revisiting. And like I say, the economy. Can I just put down a shape and it'll speak as powerfully as if I had spent hours on that same shape? And John Singer Sargent is that same kind of economist about his line and his form and his touch with oil. And the famous Degas. I taught at the university, I think you saw, over 29 years, and the students, I would have them go on assignment to look up some of these artists. And they would always come back and they would, "Where murder his name?" They said, "Yeah, I looked at Degas. He was really good." Or when it came to Carrot, "Yeah, Carrot, he was fun, you know." But you don't forget that at the same time, you know. So, but what I appreciate about Degas, not only because of his use of pastel, gorgeous layering technique, because again, these men like Lautrec and even Cassatt, they all got really excited about bringing print back to vogue at the time. Lithography had been in years already used for about almost not quite 70 years or so. And so these men really appreciated it. And etching has been with us a long time, around the time even before Rembrandt. So they knew how to use both the print but also the pastel. So sometimes Degas would put a paint or etching ground and then build up his pastels on top of it. I'm not saying this is one, but I'm just giving you, again, a little bit more expansive of his technique. The other thing I really always appreciate of Degas is his use of light, again, and composition. If you're ever stuck on understanding composition and getting it down, get away from the systems, all the lines and all the, you know, triangles and everything, and just get a clear piece of plastic paper and a marker and open up to one of his pieces and trace his compositions. Just, you know, put the plastic down, trace it. You're going to learn more about doing even one or two tracings about how he placed things, what the negative space does when doing that, and you'll appreciate that and maybe, again, employ it into your own work. So he's what I call more of the contemporary asymmetrical artist. He was the one who really brought in the idea that the higher plane is victorious, I guess you could say, over the overall composition, as opposed to Renaissance, which is the lower left or right. Mary Cassatt, as we well know, we will really, I'm sure those of you really appreciate her use of pastel. The scumbling, the feathering, the looseness, in some areas where it's almost totally unfinished, and yet when she gets to the skin, the fleshiness of it, just blooming with life and vitality, is always communicated through her work. And then again, too, how she separates the color of the gown of the baby from the mother's, blouse, and the background is just so beautifully unified again, color-wise, the way she's working it. Another artist, and you might be surprised, is Franz Klein. I always was amazed by his dynamics with line. Line and composition again. How few lines, and I know he struggled, we all do, so that's not to say that he didn't himself, but how few lines he used to create power and composition. You can't take any one of those lines out and have that whole form stand the way he's got it standing. It's almost scary, you know, if you take anything out, because it'll topple one way or the other. But he's one to really investigate the way he uses negative and positive through just black and white line. Another is Robert Motherwell. Again, just the idea of that black could be dangerous in anybody's painting. But the fact that he's used it not only as weight and power, but it can be beautiful like negatives and positives. It's like the faces and the vases, it keeps going back and forth and you can play with that. Where is that? Is that really way back in space or is it close to you in space? And I've always appreciated the dynamics of his work. I've used it in my own work. Again, I'm not showing you an exhaustive section of everything. We'd be here for years. But anyway, I just want to show you again the fluences. And of course our beloved George O'Keeffe, I'm in the right area for that. She taught me a lot about series. How you can take an object, look at an object, and keep looking at it and looking at it and looking at it and distilling it and getting down to the essence of what you're really gazing at. And so this series with the jack and the pulpit eventually ends up with just the the jack. And it's always influenced me to say, don't just take this one view. Keep looking at it until you really understand it. And I think a lot of that happens in our drawings. We have to keep trying those things to keep understanding what we really are looking at. And I believe at that point, when you really begin to grasp that, that's when who you are even comes out more, because you really have absorbed that object. And you're building a fantastic library from which to continue to draw, literally and figuratively draw from. Okay? Another artist, as I've always admired too, is Picasso, his way of deconstructing, if you want to call it too, or again, getting down to the essence of what you're looking at. So here he has a, really full-fledged, gorgeous drawing of a bull in the middle panel to the left. Then he slowly does his cubistic kind of dissecting. It's almost like a meat market, kind of like, well, this is the hind leg, this is the foreleg, this is the best cut, not so, And then eventually he works his way to that, just right above the signature. Fabulous. I mean, just the power of, again, a very simple line. Very simple line. But it's not that I say I want my drawings always be like that. I just want to be able to see and think, what is it? Really narrow down and do it. And that's where these people have influenced me. Another artist is Wayne Thiebaud. I don't know if you're familiar with him, from San Francisco. He's contemporary with a lot of the Bay artists that are up there. Nicora is another artist who is contemporary with Thiebaud. He was also very popular in the 60s doing pop art. And he's best known for his lipsticks or his cakes or his pies. Okay? And so he also did landscapes. And the landscape you're looking at probably is like, where's that? And it's true. It's nowhere, but it's everywhere. Because where he lives in San Francisco, if any of you have been there, I laughed the first time I visited. I stood at the top of a hill. I looked down. I said, no way. No, that can't be that far down. It's just, the streets are almost, at almost, I want to say 90 degrees angle. But they're just, the roadways just do this. And so he's really juxtaposed that whole landscape feeling, the severity of drops and landscape moving back and forth, and it's very extreme. So take in not only his pop art, which is good still life because of the way he uses color, but also his beautiful landscapes that are really jarring in a good way. They say, I've never looked at landscape that way before. And also his use of color is stunning. Because here you get, I hope you do, that sense of atmosphere. In the sense you got this farmland in the foreground, and suddenly you feel like there's got to be a canyon between the edge of that farm before you get to that backyard. I hope, maybe, or maybe not, but the way he's used color, the blues and the violets, really communicate, and that, again, the complements and the harmonies, communicate space and presence at the same time. So. Another artist, and it's again a little hard maybe to see more of the subtleties, is Raphael Peale, a beautiful 19th century artist that I've always keep going back to for another type of minimalism. I've done glasses in the past, glasses of wine and things of that name, but what I've always discovered about his work, and I've seen some even up close, he never completes the edge, but what he puts in is just enough, again, economy, that makes you say, oh, well, that's the top edge of the glass. But if you really look at those glasses, no edge, no edge. It's fabulous. To me, again, that's that kind of economy that's stunning in his work. I've always appreciated his use of raking light. This one doesn't necessarily have it, but he's another artist. He was one of 4 brothers, and sad to say, they're all given famous names like Rembrandt and Titian. You can go, oh, these guys, and he's Raphael. I think Rubens is another one. I think it's like those Ninja Turtles. Come on, guys. I don't think the kids, when they're watching it, really understand, what the history is of these names. I think that's a ploy by some of the Japanese here or something. But anyway, and that's okay. I didn't mean that as a bad comment. I just think it's interesting. Here is another artist that I really appreciate and is also an influence. I didn't realize that the Dutch artists at the time were really having what I call Calvinistic quick reads that people would have in their home. How do I mean that? This is by Claes, Pieter Claes, C-L-A-E-Z, and then I have another one by Deheem, D-E-H-E-E-M, that'll come next. And what I mean by that is that because of the Reformation, they're painting in the 1500s, that exploded the whole idea of getting back to being able to read the Bible literally and understanding the symbolism, that they could come up with these mentamortes or vanitases that spoke about the brevity of our life. And this is just full of that kind of symbolism There's a slightly burning wick out of the little lamp of oil in the left-hand corner. There's an overturned glass here in the foreground. There's the pen and ink, and the ink is still, it's dried on the edge of the feather. The skull itself tells enough about death, and often they would place them on books similar to the Bible, or at least some of the liturgy of the church. So this really, like I say, if this was in your home, and you were beginning to become one of the Reformation people, or the ones who were turning against the Roman Catholic Church, this would be an assurance at the same time of what they were beginning to understand. Similar in this one by Claus. You have that salt of the earth. There's a little salt container in the back. There's the bread. There's the smoking, the oysters, the nuts, the knife handle, the glass of wine, and in the back there would have been sort of like a juice or a sauce to put on the oysters. And here you have again the knife being both the handle black and white, talking about good and evil. You also have the idea, do you want to choose a life of riches, which is tobacco and oysters, or do you want to choose a life with the bread and the wine, okay, which are obviously a symbol of the Lord's Supper. So these, like I say, were very, very specifically set up. And I appreciate if you have questions about these in terms of how do I know. I only want to let you know, not only because I've studied them a long time, but thankfully I've had incredible resources through the School of Art History. And I've read quite a few of them. They're these doctoral books, but it's been great to dialogue with them and always say, how do you know that? You know, kind of pointing my finger at them. But it's been, it's validated often that this was not just a beautiful still life. There was a lot more going on in it than you will see. Vermeer is the same. So I'm moving on to my own work. As you can see, the idea, these are all pastels I'm showing you. Is to show you the similar kind of concept of the vanitas, or the mental morphe, in my own work. And even though I haven't put the skull of a human, I put the skull of a bird underneath on the bottom shelf. And then I've also played on the word note. Because when we read anything to do with anything religious or spiritual, they are really notes to us to make us really ponder and meditate. And this actually is a very old Bible, but here you have letters which are notes to us. You have the notes on the page, and then you actually have a flute as an idea that sends notes of music to us. So I'm always juxtaposing these concepts together in a lot of my work, and that's, again, you can see now the influences of story and how important it is in the work that I do. Similarly, the idea, there's nothing definite in this one, but is wisdom with a bite. And the whole idea is contrasting which wisdoms do we choose? Do we choose the wisdom of books and knowledge from that point of view? Or do we choose the wisdom that comes with another understanding of eternity? And that's represented by, there's two angels from a Bruegel painting, The War of the Angels, in the glasses themselves. So, numbers and colors are very important in my work. And again, there's a strong symbolism that really reached back foundationally in its structure to, again, my faith. So often too, I'll just set things up, and I just love the light coming through these glorious things that we have to enjoy as such as simple fruits and vegetables. And so I love just looking at how the light rakes through, and the contrast of light, juxtaposition of light, form is just very exciting for me. So simply setting these up. You might ask also a question, I'm sure might be in your mind, how long do some of these take? You'll see I get a little bit more complex, but most of these only take me a week, not even sometimes.
How large?
This one is probably about 9 by 11, 9 by 12, okay? The last two are around about the same size, so they're not very large pieces. I do get larger. This one is like 11 by 14. So. And I was also teaching nature drawing at the university. I had wonderful access to the School of Forestry. I was able to get some birds, stuffed birds, but birds, and take them back to my studio. And this one I actually purchased because I just fascinated by the mystery of color in this one bird. All the time it changes. One light on it makes it purple, another one makes it sort of a gray violet, another one makes these gorgeous blues. It's an indigo bunting. And I don't know if you have them down here, but definitely on the East Coast. You do? Great. get one. Well, don't kill it. But if you can, unless you know how to train these to sit still, you know. So, but I just love that. And woodpecker, this is a red-crested woodpecker. And the idea, not only the story, but the reflections and the beauty of light hitting both on and in and through. It's always exciting to me when I'm really working, and how you really can portray, very simply, I hope, again, the story. Here's my little boo right again, too. And this was one of 3, and they all have to do with what are we putting our really nesting in. Are we nesting out of the nest? Are we nesting in the nest? And, you know, it's just a play on the whole idea of where our nest is. And so this is done. And then sometimes I just put everything aside and then just look at one object, just one object. I'm really trying to say, what is it that's so beautiful about this? And I just spend time, this is also one of 3. This is, again, that whole idea of series. And it really captured my attention, that beautiful breaking open. The title of the series was Go Until Now. The idea that we were captivated inside like a prison, and now we're broken open, we're broken free. And there's even a symbol of the idea of the wing, even with the cracks underneath the egg below. And like I say, sometimes just getting down to one object. So if you've never had an opportunity to just simplify things for a while, try even one simple drawing for yourselves, because it'll refocus you, say, what am I looking at, or what do I want to look at? What do I want other people to look at? It will really give you a lot of challenges, as opposed to looking at everything, trying to get it all down at the same time. So this is, again, that influence of series I talked about. And George O'Keeffe wasn't the only influence on that. There are many, many artists that I've looked at that really dealt with series. Getting back to Robert Motherwell, he would do what he called his open series. And he literally, it was discovered by placing one canvas on another, and he suddenly thought, I really like that line. He did probably about 25 of these, you know. So series is a very important part for me. But they also, again, allow you to tell a story. So there's 5 in this series. And first I really enjoyed thinking about sound. How could I communicate sound in my work? And Velasco was really instrumental in making me think about this. There's 2 of his paintings that I've always gone back to. It has a figure looking like they're listening. And you really get a sense of sound. You can almost hear the dishes. You can hear the conversation. And I thought, can I do that myself? So I love the work by Rosa Bonheur. She is a fantastic, again, prior to the century, in 19th century, she's a 19th century artist. Does animals, gorgeous paintings. And there's a huge one at the Met of the Horses Fair. So I juxtaposed that in the background. It'll be in all these series. But what I did is I took all the color out, but you'll see when I finally put it back in, to create one kind of sound of the horses just rumbling past you. And then putting the bees in is another sound. And the beetle, of course, doesn't make any sound, but he's eating the apple. Again, the story unfolds, right? I also was challenged, too, at the time when I was thinking about this for a long time, because I was teaching and thinking, the big thing that was coming about in the early 2000s was deconstruction. And I thought, well, how can I do one also? There'd be a type of deconstruction in my work. So you'll see even with the next one, the pile of books is lessened. Okay, and each one you'll see the change. Watch what happens to the cloth. Watch what happens to the books. Watch what happens to the bees. You know, and that's if you see them all in series. Even if you didn't, don't misunderstand me. I've had people only seeing one at a time. But it's fun if I say, look at what I'm doing throughout the 3 periods. And the horses, as you can see, there's still a part of her horses fair. They're doing that. But I keep them in the black and white. Okay? And again, here they get really dark. And the light on the paper changes. The fabric is still folded. Okay? There's 3 bees still. The beetle is starting to lose his fruit. And then the beetle heads down. And here the bees take over the fruit. And there's more than 1 bee. There's 12. Okay? And there's the flute and the cup and the cloth and resolution. 1 bee. The cloth is quiet. You can almost hear just the horses, the four of them, going off into the open in the forest. And colors then reintroduce. So this is a story to unfold for you and to explain to you and to show you, you know, again, what I'm not just what I'm looking at it here to bring to you there. Another artist, as I said, is Bruegel, that I really appreciated his understanding of the culture and the times. So this is a highly symbolic painting that he did, and I just borrowed it. I change things ever so slightly when I do copy these masterworks. So if you're afraid of copying, you know, change it. It's okay, but also when you actually title it, remember to put in after the work of, and you're safe. You're safe. I don't know if you have different rules down here, but I haven't found too many of the others. So I often say after the work by Peter Bruegel, so that people understand that I have used his work. But even in the interpretation, I've always changed something or eliminated something just enough so that I'm not taking a direct credit for or copying that. And here you have the opportunity to juxtapose a still life with that kind of background to, I pray, hopefully, to embellish the story that I'm actually illustrating in this particular work. The painting, by the way, is The Blind Leading the Blind. So if you're not familiar with his work. Here's one that won the first or the grand prize in the Pastel Journal 3 years ago. And so it was again a tall piece of paper. This is probably around, I would say, I always forget some of all my sizes, but it's probably around 16 by 20 or 18 by 20. So it's wide. These are getting a little bit larger as I do these more complex pieces. And juxtapose it with a Goya painting in the background. And Goya really understood the plight, not only of man, but the plight of especially the man who was just discarded in prisons. They were not taken care of anywhere near what our men are taken, or women are taken care of in prison today. They were just really allowed to rot. And so he was very upset by that. I think you see that in the madhouse. He also did a lot of madhouses, insanity houses that you saw. If you ever seen the movie Amadeus, and that whole idea of madness, he painted a lot of that in his work too. He understood, like in the Disasters of War, the etchings too. And then I juxtapose that. You can see very faintly in the glasses. Again, it's hard not only in the projected screen, but you need to get up close to it. Is this would be a Bosch, I'm sorry, in the glasses of St. Christopher. And if any of you know the story, it's all about a giant carrying a little child on his back. And as he's carrying the child across this river, the child gets heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier. And it turns out to be the Christ child. So I'm playing with that whole idea in this whole piece. Notes, books, price tags, everything is, and the birds, the color of the birds, it's all very valuable in the story. So, and this really starts stretching probably many of you in the audience, but this is about 22 by 32. This is the series that I did, and they're more apocryphal, absolutely correct. But that allows me to really play a lot with symbols and symbolism. You can read it just as a painting with a lot of activity in it, and I've understood that for years. But if you continue to push me, you'll get more and more of the story, and it's really fun to say, but there's a lot of symbolism, not just in my work, but there's a lot of symbolism. When I did another lecture once about symbolism, and it's very interesting. We all have them. You know, if I had a little statue here that was gold and it looked like this, you don't know what that is, right? An Academy Award, you know? So we all have them. If I just showed you the stripe for Coca-Cola and didn't put the words Coca-Cola, you know what it is. So we all have, in a sense, our symbols and our icons, but these are the ones I keep drawing on that I feel tells a story from my point of view, or at least from what I understand. So. And I also have done, it was in your newsletter, illustrations of drawings of in pastel of poppies and of lilies too. So, and this one is also quite large, about 24 by 24. So, yeah, I know you're gonna have to fix that board. Only if somebody comes over here. Right? So with that, I want to shut this down and do a little demonstration for you. Yeah, this should go out. So. Often, all the pieces that you saw on the slides were all done live. They're right in front of me. Okay, so my still lifes are set up right there. When it comes to lighting, that's something more of a personal and kind of feeling. But often I just set it up. And when I start, I usually start on my pastel paper. I do use the Sennelier Le Carte. I really like that sanded surface. But I know there's lots of other sanded surfaces out there, so you'll have to try them to really get comfortable with what works for you. And I'm sure many of you already have found that. Thank you. That feels so much better. I know, maybe nobody's ever said that to you before, but it's like, I can't see anybody. Anyway, often I don't always work on a gray or a black background, but for the assignment yesterday with the workshop and for today, I just want to show you that sometimes when you're learning about color, it helps to have an immediate darkening of that white paper. It's like, it's a white piece of paper, what am I going to do? So they come out, Sennelier has an incredible line. I would like to say right now 20 colors, but maybe they have more since I started working with it. But the reason I also like the Le Carte is that it's sanded, and therefore with the sanding, it takes in so much pastel. And very rarely have I had drifting. It might come off a little if I cover it, but in terms of drifting, I think you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes when you have a finished piece and the, excuse me, my nose is leaky, pastel just keeps coming down, and sometimes people would say, my pastel, what's wrong? It's heavy, it's on the edge of the mat. You go, ugh, you know. So with this paper, I've really always found that it's great. It takes it in. And also with the Sennelier Le Carte, if ever I have an opportunity to do another workshop, you can do a lot of different mediums on this paper too. One is with alcohol too. So you can draw, because it's a vegetable fiber, it can't handle water. But there's a lot more mediums you can work on the Sennelier paper than just the pastel. So just letting you know that. But I chose it because of the amount of pastel that I can put down and get on this piece of paper. It's wonderful. Often when I start, as you can see, I like to put my parameters in when I'm looking at the piece of paper, because what I've often found is when you get to the framers and you've drawn to the edge and you haven't thought about that, you lose a 1/4 inch all the way around your piece, and then you go, oh, I didn't realize that. So this helps to guard from that mistake, that error, but it also gives me almost like a viewfinder so that I can focus in on what I'm looking at and know that I won't go over those edges, so I can really plan it that way. And then sometimes, like this is going to be a symmetrical drawing that I'm doing for you today, I'll actually put that cross or that X in it, depending on where I want to place the form that I'm looking at. So here I'm just going to do a quick sketch of this New York apple. I couldn't find a New Mexico one fast enough when I got here, so I just brought one with me. It's traveled to quite a few states. I hope it tastes good tonight when I try it. Yeah. See, the flavor has been enhanced. So I will, quickly sketch what I'm looking at here. Okay, and simply put in just where I see the form. And I'm always checking, especially if it's symmetrical. You can do this with a ruler, I sometimes have, but also, my edges, is it fairly centered in this piece of paper? And then checking where the edges of my shadow are and putting these forms in here. So, how's it coming up? Pretty good? Can you see it? Okay. All right. Now, because I was a printmaker, I also had studied and did a lot of color lithography. I learned how to layer my colors. So I would often make an orange by making a red first and then a yellow on top of that. And different types of placements of the red, if it went the red over the yellow, you would get an entirely different orange than when you would put the yellow over the red. So I still apply that in my work when I'm doing my drawings today. So even though we have this apple that has a lot of yellow, I'm going to start where the lighter areas are. Okay. I will also apply the colors in a way that you probably aren't very familiar with. And I'll start off with the blue in the background, because eventually I'm going to make it so that it will be a complement to the green-yellow. And if you understand the green-yellow, we'll have more violet in the background, or violet as a contrasting hue to what's happening in the apple. Also, as I talked yesterday at the workshop, a lot of times you might miss looking for your core shadow. And it's really important that, especially with objects that have a tendency to really be round or a rounder form, make sure you know where your light source is coming from. Right now the shadow really does have about 3 different shadows going on, but I will be focusing on just the one. But just so you understand that, take the time to really know, is it coming from above, is it coming from the sides? Like the box and the table are influencing the sides of the apple, making it a lot lighter. Make sure you take that into account when you're actually doing the drawing. So I'll bring in some more of those light edges that I was just saying happens just before the core of that apple really begins. And then you see a lot more reflected light happening at the same time. So bringing that core about right there, the shadow here, the shadow of the table, and then bringing again the rest of the blue down. Yesterday also at the workshop, I probably pushed the ladies a little hard in respect to really going back to primaries, but I think there's nothing more invaluable than remembering and rediscovering how primaries can really enhance your understanding of color. Just getting back to the real natural form is really wonderful. Of color layering and visual colors. They often turn out the most, and they did yesterday, the most vibrant drawings that I get excited. Maybe they were like, this doesn't look like it, but I kept on saying, no, you're learning a little bit more about color layering than you ever realized before, and how color really does interact with your eye and with the forms that you're looking at. So as you see now, I add really that red almost all over. I'm keeping that light area not only because it has the highlight, but also because it is that sort of lime green, of which I'm going to put in a very little bit right here, along with the blue. So to give you more of that sense of the lights of not only the top of the apple, but also the color. So, and I'm going to bring some of that down because that's going to be turn into more of the duller reflection that I see from the table and my cloth, which is underneath here. Okay. And then again on the sides where it's darkest, eventually I'm going to bring in that value, okay, and the light in the front. How am I doing on time? Am I okay? Okay. I will probably not have time to work it all the way up, but I just want to make sure that I give you enough information here. Okay. Again, I'm just going to enhance this a little bit more and go over this lightly here and enhancing again where the dark edges are here. I'm going to blow a little bit more of this blue glow back here. You're probably all thinking, there's no way it's going to look like that. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's okay. Hang in there. Yes, I often put on probably about 3 or 4 layers of pastel before, and then I blend with my fingers. I know some people wonder about the health issues. I understand the health issues. I often have an ion purifier right next to me, so at least residual dust is moving that way. I understand you can absorb into your skin. I'm taking that risk, but some of you don't need to and don't have to. Don't do it. Don't. You know, you can put gloves on your hands. I'm just so used to, I can tell how many layers I have just by feeling. And if something really can take more, or it's deficit, or I can remove, it's all a part of the drawing process for me. So at this point, usually I stop, and I'm going to actually start to blend. And as you see, thank you again for this beautiful, I know it's backwards, I realized I had it backwards, but forgive me for your wonderful apron. I usually have a terry cloth on my
Will she lose her fingerprints?
If I have. I think it's to an advantage. And if I have to, then I have more liberties to do more things than I didn't realize I could do. No, you know what I found when I worked with the Kitty Wallace paper? I started blending on that paper, and I realized there was some red on my paper, and I kept saying, where's this red coming from? I was bleeding. So I did not know her paper was that harsh. Thank you, Kitty. I appreciate that. So I learned not to blend with my hands on that. That's when I have used gloves or brushes to blend on her paper. But as far as I know, I really don't know the outcome if you do this too often. But this is really soft. So it's never really impacted me the same way as Kitty Wallace's paper has. Ursta, I think, is another really nice sanded paper to work on as well. But now you can see as I'm blending, you can see I'm creating more of these, even though I know there's no such thing as brown, I'm creating all these neutrals that are giving me some more of the depth of the colors that I want to really create in the background as well as in the object itself. So again, keeping your hands clean throughout the drawing process is a wonderful way to avoid muddiness, and that's something that I've seen way too often when I've taught pastels. People have gotten muddy in their work. So you want to keep your hands clean, and you want to keep your surfaces as much as you can clean. And when you, like when I go to this lighter area to this area, if I do that, you can maybe lightly see I've got some yellow in it. So that's why I often wipe my hands even between moving from one color to another. Again, I'm glad some of you are shaking your hands because I'm sure you do this, but I want to explain a little bit more about my process here. So at this point, I will need to see. Don't you love it? Sometimes I think, I can't see anymore, it drives me crazy. Anyway, so, all right. And sometimes I move fairly quickly through this stage. The little pieces that are on the step there, those are usually my morning studies before I begin my larger pieces. So, and they are for sale today and today only. But yeah, so I work up a little sketch. How long do those take me? You won't believe it, really only about an hour to do. So it's a fast, quick, light, dark, get the values down, position down, and then I'm ready to go into the larger pieces. So just like you do 3-minute sketches for a figure, and then work up to 10, then work up to an hour, it's the same process for me. I don't ever go into a drawing raw. I always like to have a little bit of warm-up in the work that I'm doing. And it helps me to just do that right brain shift to set all of the, the noise of my life aside so I can really focus on what I'm doing. Okay, again, here is now when I'm going to reach for, it's really a very lush, darker green, just to neutralize that background a little bit more so I can set it back further away from the light that's happening in the apple itself. So this is going to be applied now over that violet. It'll still show through, it'll have its nuances, but I can guarantee you if you add more color to your blacks overall, you're going to have a lot richer, more of that velvet quality in the work. All of the blacks that you saw in the still lifes and other paintings that I did, they're all created the same way. Okay, so you have this foundation of building of color and light and dark in the piece. At this point, I almost blend at every level that I put down. Like I say, initially I put about 3 layers down. I don't count them. I just have, again, that's where the fingers, for me, feeling is really important. To be able to feel, okay, I don't have quite enough, because you can't really blend if you don't quite have enough pastel. I mean, you can. You can use other tools, but when I'm drawing so much with the hands, I like to have that feeling that I've got enough down that I can keep moving. Or if I want to erase, that I have enough down to erase and get back to the surface of the paper. which I will only assume until you invite me down for another workshop, you know how to erase pastel, okay? So, it's possible. With this paper, you always have to be careful because since it is a vegetable fiber paper, it has a tendency to, if you blow and you spit, you will find little tiny holes. Okay, so it's better to tap, or to, if you have an air gun, you can blow your extra pastel off that way, or tap it in a garbage can. You know, and I do this again next to my air purifier, so I'm not, you know, sucking in a lot of residual dust. Okay, just sharpening up those edges, and now I'm going to attack those again. One more thing is to just make this a little bit darker underneath the apple. I will do the same application of the dark. And this is also a time when, if I was doing more sharp edge pieces, I would make more of my corrections, so that, you know, when I really want to show, let's say it's like a cup or a dish or a bowl, that's when then I go back in and do my you know, lines, ruler lines, to get, you know, really well-formed ellipses, or if they're actual ovals or circles. So that's what you saw me doing with those lines of green. I just want to make sure that the edge of my form and the edge of my shadow is pretty well lined up. You know, I'm fudging it a little, but I'm just showing you some of the other techniques, other things that I'm looking at. And I don't want to lose that light on the darkest value area of the apple. So again, this is a good time to put that yellow back in on the other edges. So that brings that out. And then just correcting one more time this edge right here. The first time I demonstrated for my class, I remember it's always a little uneasy feeling, because, you know, for me the first time was I never showed anybody what I do. And the second time, I mean the second I started, I got lost for a little while. Then suddenly I was aware there was 40 eyes looking at me. And I was like, oh, I had to really, you know, pray through this thing. Okay, just keep going. So I am much more relaxed now. But it was the strangest feeling. Suddenly you feel all these eyes, you go, oh my goodness, you know. So I don't know how many artists you've had. I'm sure you've had plenty do demonstrations for you. But I'm sure there's a certain amount of timidity, you know, unless they've done tons, you know, that every artist goes through and say, this is what I do, and oh, you're watching me. So another thing I've also believed in is I have no secrets. I think a lot of artists, to a certain degree, to their harm, they keep what they think is really special to their techniques or their abilities. And I always say, really, it's not about that, you know? And quite frankly, it's the same thing. I always go back to Rembrandt, the example of Rembrandt. He painted a painting that nobody could copy. And I know if you've looked at his work, you've seen some of the examples of other students who copied his work. But they're always, you know, that fraction off of being a Rembrandt, because it was not his hand behind the brush. Just like you can have a fantastic forger reproducing your signature on a check, but there's always one part that's missing, is your individual energy and spirit behind that line. So sharing things amongst each other should be a habit amongst you, because the next person you share with, it will always be something different. It will, how you use it will always be another interpretation, another way of looking at it. So I'm encouraging you. I'm not chastising or anything. I'm just saying, I don't. So if you have anything you want to ask me about, I'm happy to say, this is what I do. This is how I do it. Take it. You know, it's either that, I'm going to die with it, and you guys are lost out. Okay. I'm happy to let it go there. So what I did is, because I wanted to move that shadow up a little bit more, I just overrided it with, again, a little bit more of this red, which we'll keep adding to. Okay. Now I want to add a little bit more, and I'm going to pull out a warmer, almost on the edge of a warm yellow, to really warm up the contrast of the edge of these reds here. So bringing that up, because it's not actually in the apple, but it actually is in the red that I don't want to lose. And if I get too much blue in that area, I call it sort of like a masking out, but it really helps to keep areas clean and crisp of color too. And I'm going to enhance that stem area right in here. Okay, let me bring this in. Any questions so far? I'm very happy to field anything if you know.
When you're working on your more ambitious, your larger,
right,
more complicated subjects, do you work from life then and the things that obviously are there, like your stacks of books and so forth? Are you working from life, or do you set something up and photograph it and look from that?
I never work from photographs. I'm always working from life, the still lifes especially. In my oil paintings, I'll often work from photograph, but only because I started the plein air, and I brought the plein air back, and then with the photograph I can continue to see, because I don't like to misjudge my understanding of the edges of trees or of landscape. In terms of lighting, like I said, yes, I'm working from right there in front of the still life, right there in front of me. But then it's a figurative speech of saying it, but I turn the lights off. And I start to say, like a conductor in an orchestra, you can hear a piece by Mozart by one conductor, and the same piece will be conducted by another conductor, and you go, that's the same piece? Because, again, like that energy behind the line, that conductor brought maybe more of the oboes out, because that was something so impacting to him in the way Mozart created it. So the same thing when I was still life. I turn off the lights so I can say, but what do I really want to say? Ask the question again. Where do I want your eye to go? And that's when then I start conducting. You know, you're welcome. No happen. So it's a long habit of mine to ignore natural light, but that's also after studying natural light for a long time too. So all the artists you saw that I really have been influenced by were also amazing studiers of art, of light and texture and landscape. And you know, you can never get enough study, you know, using your eyes that way. Okay, how am I doing time? Just don't want to keep you people, and also 15? Okay. Just a little bit more. Any other questions or thoughts, or you want to know?
When you do your larger pieces, do you draw directly on the board, or do you do a preliminary drawing?
I do a lot of preliminary sketches in my sketchbook, but just with a pencil, okay?
Yeah,
and once I get the composition right...
You don't draw it life size and then trace it down or something?
No. On a 9 by 12 sketchbook, sketch it out and get that composition. And if again, traveling, I couldn't bring sketchbooks with me, which I would have liked to. But you'll see sometimes one still life will take 2 or 3 sketches, just because I say, no, that really doesn't work there, and I'll move an object here or there. But then some of them I just hit it. And that's all. I just need one quick sketch, and then I go right onto the board with the vine charcoal and move from there. So sometimes I don't like even beginning a drawing. And that sounds funny to say, but because sometimes I look at it and go, oh, that's ugly. You know, it's not what I wanted, or it's not where I want to go. But that's when I always have that one of those long talks with myself. Okay. Now, you decide to draw this, So, you're going to, now, rise to the occasion and keep going. And sometimes it's a matter of just working it one more day, and an area will develop and go, okay, now I can finish this now, But at the first, sometimes you go, I don't think so. I have thrown out a lot of drawings. I really have. So, it's not that I don't say I don't like it, and I don't want to finish it, and I don't want anything to do with it. But... okay. So at this point is the final time when I often now start to add, that final layer. It's not really final yet, but due to time, I'm just going to move a little bit faster here. But I usually get the the deeper darks, and this is a black, but again, you can see because I've laid a foundation of color, there's a lot more color influences going on here. Okay. Now this is where I'm going to play a little trick with you. I'm going to make a little contradiction in what's happening in the apple. Because here, visually, what you're looking at is just a reflection of the table as I was drawing up to this point. But now I'm going to say, but I want you to look at this apple in another way. And I'm going to put something else happening in the drawing. And hopefully you'll catch it. Okay, and bring that up. And bring this a little bit higher. As to say, where's that reflection coming from? And that's what I want you to think about. And then this is the same idea of what I was saying earlier, is creating the story in the work that makes you say, why did she put it that way? Was it really happening there? You know? And you can argue with me, that's fine. All right, but this is where I have a little bit. I'm sorry if I'm dirtying this. I'm sure you guys can help me clean it afterwards. But I didn't think to put any paper down at this moment. Okay. And again, enhancing the value by putting in the light around it. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of that green. Now I also work with pastel pencils, sometimes to just, again, crisp up an edge that I can't do, because I do work most of the time with soft pastels. I do have new pastels and a couple other brands that are hard, and they're hard often because they are kiln dried pastels. So I will maybe, I brought some, but I'm not going to do this right now, but if you needed to, put in a detail, a pastel pencil really helps, just to really crisp it up. And I like using them for that, but I hate drawing with them. Though I have a friend who just loved drawing pastel pencils, so she did a beautiful job. And I think, how do you do that? It's just always drive me. No, I couldn't do it. So. And now I'm starting to reach a little bit more of the light here. I'm going to bring this area up a little bit right here. And again, you can see how I'm really, focusing a lot on contrast, really to get more of the look that I'm looking for, what I want to say in the actual piece too itself. It's too quiet. Anybody have any other questions? I'm only here today. Yeah.
Please come back.
That's very sweet. Thank you. I would like to. You have a beautiful state, and it was wonderful to visit the last time I was here, and I would like to stay longer. I'm not. I'm leaving Monday, but I would love to visit more of your beautiful landscapes. Because as I started off as a pastelist, I was a landscape artist first, and did a lot of landscapes. I moved on to still life in '93, partly because I've just always been curious due to looking at those Dutch artists and thinking, well, could I do one too? I had never tried it. Really, I learned how to use pastel when I was in college. It was portraiture. My master graduate works was portraiture. Not all of it. I did a lot of landscapes and lithography, but I did portraiture in pastel. So I got excited about that as well, but I never continued, because early on I realized that unless you're really grabbing the soul and spirit of a person when you're looking at them, it never quite, it's not that it didn't look like them, it just never felt like them. And that's the beauty of somebody like Rembrandt, I feel, that he captured it so beautifully, sometimes economically in his pen and ink sketches or his etchings, but also so in depth in his greater portraits. And if you've ever noticed, he makes the hands glow in a unique way that the face doesn't. And yet the face still glows. But watch his hands next time you look at a Rembrandt, a real painting of a Rembrandt. So, all right. Again, I'm not completing this too much. I just want to get a little bit further. And then I'll show you where I would normally go with something like this. So again, keeping all of these kinds of, it's almost like a juggling scene sometime. You're always looking, okay, how's the light, how's the dark, how's the light, how's the dark? How's the composition, how's that working? Is the light over here too much light as opposed to the dark that's happening over here? And that's really very valuable, and that's, again, that beautiful shift from you talking to yourself about it to actually drawing it so that you're seeing it. So. And putting it into. You can talk to yourself so you're blue in the face if you don't put it down. Okay? It's like, you know, scolding a kid and they said, that's not what you really told me to do. Anyway. Okay, so that I just want to show you where I'm going because I really want to field more questions or talk more, but stay there. Don't go away. And show you where I would finally finish up with. And again, this is more what you would see. Okay. Is that?
Towards you. Yeah, lay it flat. Just lay it flat.
There you go. Okay. Is that what? There you go.
That's great.
Really same minimal amount of colors. Okay. And just the application and putting it together. A little bit different shape apple, but same kind of apple. So. We also did yesterday a series of studies on reflections. Let's see if I can get this. Come on, let go. And so I was teaching them yesterday how to really start to look at reflections and how to really deal with what's inside a silver cup and to take what you're seeing from those two edges out and just really draw the abstract quality of what's happening in the cup. And then when you actually deal with the silver or reflection, that's what's happening there. It's all abstract. It's all abstract. And that's something I think, you know, we forget, we get overwhelmed with all the busyness of sometimes a reflection. And the better thing to do is take it out of the scene for a minute, sketch it, and then you can put it back together in a final piece of the drawing. So, and if you have friends who love abstract, say, see, I can do one too.
Did you use pencils a lot on that?
No, this was, again, all, a couple of new pastels just to get the crispness of the edge, you know, but these are still, again, your fat, chunky kinds of soft pastels. The pastels I work with, soft pastels, are, some of them are made by a man, Paul Damaris. If you want his website, I've got that. You can order some from him as well. But, you know, you've got a lot of beautiful soft pastels now. When I was first drawing in pastel, we only had Rembrandts, Sennelier, and I hope most of you know the first 30 colors that Sennelier developed were the first, they were Degas colors. He went to Sennelier and said, can you make pastels for me? And they did. So the first 30, if you're ever using, you're using his colors as well, his palette as well. So, any other questions that I can?
Would you put the reflections on the flat on the table?
Is that?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, yeah. But it takes from, again, just studying what's happening in the actual cup first. Don't miss that step. I did probably about 50 of these before I started working with reflections and silver in my own work. So, yes?
You know, I can't remember that you had the cup,
Yeah.
and you had the mirror.
Yeah.
Where was the book?
Well, you probably forgot, but I was doing the Yanni CD. It was underneath
Yeah,
the
right,
cup.
right.
Yeah, yeah. So what do you mean by
It was where? The cup and then the mirror and then where was the CD?
No, there was no mirror. The CD, the CD looked probably reflected enough, but that's what we were doing. Yeah. So there you go. Any other thoughts or questions?
Well, I would like to say it's very nice to see somebody that blends because so many people say do not blend those colors.
It's just a different technique.
You'll lose the vibrancy of the color if you blend, and those colors are gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, again, you can see it. Can you see that in relationship to that?
So to keep it from getting muddy, do you sort of just blend where the two colors meet rather than over the whole thing? Or do you keep it from getting
I
muddy?
think it's a matter of you always maintaining really conscious of what color I'm putting down and what color is it when I'm putting on top of it that can make that mud. And that's, again, as a printmaker, it's never been a problem for me. But that's when I teach, I try to teach people to start thinking about layers and then watch how they blend. Even in scumbling, you want to allow the pastel to slide over the other pastel, creating a new color. But how much pressure you use, paper you use, application of it, juxtaposition of those things, that'll either create or you know, not create mud. But that's where you need to invite me down again. Yeah,